Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. We're diving into the world of insulin pumps today.
Insulin pumps, yes.
Specifically, we're talking patch pumps versus tubed pumps.
Hmm.
You know, going beyond those glossy brochures and all the marketing jargon
Yeah,
to help you figure out which type might actually be the right fit for you.
right.
And our guide for this deep dive is this fascinating article we found from Diabetes and Technology.
It's a good one. It's really easy to get caught up, in that simplicity of patch equals discrete, tubes equals, well, tubes.
Yeah.
But like this article shows us there's so much more to think about.
Right.
We're talking about those little details, those nuances that can make a huge difference in your life every single day.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
that whole thing with the patch pumps about how they last 3 days and then you just toss it out, case closed. Like it's not that simple.
Right.
This article really digs into that assumption, especially when it comes to reservoirs and tubing. So can you give us a little more information on that?
Yeah, so the research that this article cites, it suggests that those recommendations from the manufacturers, they might be a little bit on the conservative side,
Okay.
particularly when we're talking about reservoirs. There are actually studies out there that show that insulin, when it's stored in those syringe-type reservoirs, the kind that you find in a lot of tubed pumps,
Hmm.
that insulin can actually stay stable and be good to use for up to 7 days.
Wait, really? Hold on. So all that tiny print they give us about changing the reservoir every 3 days,
Yeah.
that might not be like set in stone.
Yeah.
That could be a game changer for people. I mean, think about the convenience, the cost savings.
Huge.
Imagine cutting your supply costs, like more than half.
Exactly.
And that's what this research is suggesting is possible.
Yeah, and it's not just about those reservoirs. This article, they point out that tubing, that often gets tossed out too soon, too. A lot of
Yeah.
times, that can last longer than 3 days as well, with zero issues.
Really? So this whole idea of the patch pump being on this fixed 3-day lifespan, I mean, it makes you wonder if it's more about, sales tactic
Yeah, absolutely.
than it is about actual science.
Yeah, for sure. It raises that question. Now,
Yeah.
to be fair, some people, they really find comfort in that fixed routine.
I get it.
But if you're someone who wants more flexibility, or maybe you're on a tight budget, understanding how long these components can actually last, that's key.
Yeah, this is why I love a good deep dive.
Yeah.
It's all about uncovering these, like, hidden gems of information.
Right.
Okay. So speaking of flexibility, let's unpack that idea a little bit further.
Okay.
The article talked about these really subtle but important differences in how you actually fill these pumps. And it's easy to overlook these little details when you're just looking at the big picture.
For sure. And what might seem like a really minor detail to one person, it can make a world of difference for someone else. Like, for example, someone with dexterity issues. The article, they talk about how those patch pumps, they often require you to fill through this tiny little hole using a syringe.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of tubed pumps, they use reservoirs that are actually designed to be easier to grip.
So it's all about finding what works for you, for your individual needs.
Exactly. And that's a really important takeaway here. It's not about, which pump is objectively better. It's about which one fits best into your life, into your needs.
And speaking of finding the perfect fit, let's talk about cannulas, because this article does not hold back.
No.
They straight up call the lack of cannula choice like a major drawback of patch pumps.
Yeah, and for good reason.
Yeah.
It's not just about personal preference. It can actually be really important for managing some medical issues.
Like tunneling.
Yeah,
Right.
no.
And for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with that term, tunneling is when the cannula actually pushes through your skin.
Ouch.
Ouch is right. Or what about the fact that everyone's body is different and insulin absorbs differently in different spots?
Totally. And with tubed pumps, you have so many options when it comes to cannulas, like different lengths, different materials, angles, you name it, they've got it.
It's true.
It's all about finding what works best for your body.
But with a patch pump, you're kind of stuck with their one-size-fits-all option,
Right.
which, let's be honest, is not ideal for everyone.
Nope. And that's why the article really emphasizes how important it is to have a trial period, if at all possible. Because if you don't even know that other cannula types exist, how are you supposed to find the best solution for you?
Right.
It's tough.
This is giving me so much to think about. And we haven't even gotten to, like, the more, shall we say, interesting anecdotes from this article.
Oh, I do love a good anecdote.
Well, get ready, because the article dives into what they call physical factors.
Okay.
Trust me, listener, you're going to want to hear this.
Okay.
So they break it down into 3 categories.
Yeah.
Control, visibility, and then this, like, catch-all category of everything else.
As someone who likes things to be organized, that everything else kind of makes me a little twitchy, but all right. I'm ready for the anecdotes.
All right. So first up, control. We're talking about whether you need like a separate device, like a handheld controller or an app on your phone, to actually work your pump.
Right.
And the article points out that with patch pumps, you're very reliant on that extra piece of tech.
Right.
Whereas with most tube pumps, you've got at least some level of on-pump control as a backup.
Which is so important, and it's not something that people always think about until they're in that situation where they need it.
Right.
So listener, imagine this. You're out for the night. Maybe you forgot your handset at home.
Oh, no.
Or your phone battery dies. At the worst possible time, of course.
Oh, worse.
With the tubed pump, you've usually got some options for manually controlling things.
Right. Like it's a difference between having actual physical keys to your front door versus just relying on your smartphone to unlock it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that low-tech backup can really be a lifesaver.
Absolutely. Love that analogy. Now, visibility. The patch pumps definitely have the upper hand there. Out of sight, out of mind, as they say.
Unless they're not out of mind.
True.
Because, we've all been there. Technology isn't perfect.
Right.
But when your insulin pump is acting up, it's not exactly a laughing matter.
Yeah.
And the article shares some pretty relatable stories about these screaming malfunctions with patch pumps.
Yes. The infamous patch pump malfunctions. Didn't they even mention needing a hammer in one instance?
Okay, they might have been exaggerating a little there.
Maybe.
But the point is that when a patch pump has a major malfunction, it can be way more obvious than if a tubed pump has an issue.
Yeah. And potentially way more, disruptive to try to silence. But from a purely aesthetic point of view, I get it. I understand why that discreetness of a patch pump is so appealing to so many people. It's really all about figuring out what matters most to you, weighing those trade-offs.
Right. Okay, you ready for the everything else category?
Hit me.
This is where it gets good. All right, listener. Let's talk about something that maybe you've wondered about, but, felt awkward asking.
Yeah.
Intimacy with an insulin pump.
Ah, yes.
The article actually goes there. They talk about, the pros and cons of intimate encounters with each pump type.
For research purposes, of course.
Of course. All in the name of science and a thorough analysis. But it also covers, other surprisingly relatable scenarios that I think a lot of people don't really think about, like navigating those, shall we say, cramped festival toilets where dropping your pump could be a real disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Or how about playing sports where, a stray elbow could mean trouble?
Yeah.
Real life stuff.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that your individual lifestyle and your comfort levels, they really play a huge role in this decision. There's no right answer for everyone.
Right.
It's about what's best for you in your life.
Absolutely. Okay. Ready to move on to our final section.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about continuity planning.
Okay.
And this isn't just about having some spare insulin on hand. We're talking about what happens when something goes wrong with the pump itself.
Right. Being prepared. And as someone who likes to be prepared, this is the part that really spoke to me.
Yeah?
They actually include this really helpful visual in the article
Okay.
that compares how much backup stuff you need for each type of pump. And let's just say, listener, you are carrying a lot less if you use a patch pump.
Which makes sense. You've basically got the whole system right there on your body.
Right, exactly.
But then they get into this, almost MacGyver-esque suggestion that you could, theoretically extract insulin from a failed pump in an emergency. I mean, is that even possible?
So it's definitely not ideal, and it would really depend on your specific pump model.
Yeah.
And honestly, you'd have to be really comfortable with that level of, shall we say, DIY medical intervention.
Yeah, not something to try at home without talking to your doctor.
Exactly. But I think this section just really highlights how important it is to have a solid backup plan, no matter what. And that plan might look a little bit different depending on which type of pump you're using.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Wow, we really covered a lot today. Listener, you've been on, a crash course in patch pumps and tube pumps. So let's bring it all home. What are the big takeaways here? What do you really want our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that it's not about saying team patch or team tubes.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out what you need.
Right.
What really matters to you when it comes to managing your diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So is it discretion? Is that the most important thing?
Okay.
Or do you need to have flexibility in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How comfortable are you with the hands-on stuff, the maintenance?
Right.
Those are the questions you really want to be asking yourself.
It's so true. I mean, like the article said, what works for one person isn't going to work for everyone. And it's a bummer because they made a good point. it's not always easy to try different pumps before you commit, long term.
Yeah. And that's a real challenge. Imagine being stuck with a pump for 4 years that just doesn't quite work for you.
Ah,
And it's all because you never even got to see what else is out there.
and that is why I'm such a big believer in these deep dives.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Our listener right now, they have way more information probably than they get from like a quick chat with their doctor or a pamphlet. They can go into those conversations feeling good, feeling informed.
Absolutely. They can say, hey, this is what I need. This
Yeah.
is what matters to me.
Yeah,
It goes way beyond the marketing and the hype.
love it.
These are choices about their lives.
Yes. Okay, before we wrap up, I always like to leave our listeners with something to like chew on, a little food for thought. What's got you thinking today?
Well, the article really got me thinking about those trial systems for insulin pumps and how limited they are.
Okay.
What if we could just completely rethink how those work?
Interesting.
Like instead of being stuck with just one company or one specific pump, what if there were these shorter trials
Okay.
where people could try a bunch of different options and figure out what really truly works best for them before they commit to anything long term?
I love that.
Right. Think about how much happier people would be.
Right.
And more importantly, how it could actually lead to better health outcomes for people in the long run. That's a conversation I think we need to be having.
Yes, 100%. Maybe it's time for a shakeup in the diabetes tech world. As always, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of insulin pumps. We'll catch you next time.